Rocky was a beautiful dog, a small bundle of joy with bright, expressive eyes and a coat that shimmered under the light. His tail never seemed to stop wagging, and his boundless enthusiasm for life made him impossible to ignore. At just 4 years old, he was full of energy, eager to play, and always ready to shower anyone he met with affection. His playful barks and cheerful demeanor made him a favorite among the shelter staff, who adored his lively spirit and friendly nature. Despite all his wonderful qualities, there was one thing about Rocky that deeply puzzled everyone at the shelter. He simply couldn't keep a home. He had been adopted not once, not twice, but an astonishing 7 times. Each time, a loving family would take him in, seemingly thrilled to give him the forever home he deserved. Yet within just a few weeks, he would be brought back, leaving the staff bewildered and heartbroken. The most confusing part was that the reasons given by the families were all over the place. One family claimed he was too energetic, while another said he was too lazy and refused to go for walks. Some insisted he was too affectionate, constantly demanding attention, while others said he wasn't friendly enough. One adopter even described him as not a good fit, without any further explanation. None of it made sense. How could the same dog be perceived in such drastically different ways? To the staff at the shelter, Rocky was perfect. He was fun, affectionate, and full of life. He had never shown any signs of aggressive behavior, nor did he seem to have any unusual habits. Every time he was returned, he greeted the staff as if nothing had happened, bouncing around with joy as if happy to be back. But why did so many families struggle to keep him? Determined to find out the truth, a young student named Emma, who had been volunteering at the shelter for several months, decided to take matters into her own hands. Emma had always loved Rocky. She enjoyed playing with him, watching him race around the shelter yard, and laughing at his goofy antics. She simply couldn't believe that such a lovable dog could be anything but a delight to have at home. So, she came up with a plan. "I'll take him home for the night," she suggested to the shelter director. "Maybe if I observe him outside of the shelter, I'll understand what's going on." It seemed like the perfect idea. That evening, Emma carefully placed an excited Rocky into his carrier and carried him to her car. As she drove home, she glanced at him in the rear-view mirror. His tail was wagging so fast that his entire body seemed to vibrate with excitement. "You're just happy to go for a ride, aren't you?" she said with a chuckle. Rocky let out a happy bark in response. Still, despite her confidence in him, Emma couldn't help but feel a little nervous. What if there really was something wrong with Rocky? What if, away from the familiarity of the shelter, he became a completely different dog? Had all those families been right after all? When she arrived home, she decided to take things slow. She gently placed the carrier on the floor, opened the door, and stepped back. She wanted Rocky to explore at his own pace without pressure. She didn't want to overwhelm him. Instead of hovering, she busied herself tending to her other pets, her old Labrador, Charlie, and her cat, Lizzie, while keeping an eye on Rocky from a distance. At first, the little dog was cautious. He sniffed the air, his ears twitching as he assessed his unfamiliar surroundings. Slowly, he took his first hesitant steps out of the carrier, pausing now and then to glance around. But after a few minutes, his uncertainty disappeared, replaced by his usual high-energy excitement. Suddenly, he was darting around the room, his paws tapping against the floor as he excitedly sniffed furniture, jumped onto cushions, and barked happily at nothing in particular. Emma smiled as she watched him. This was the Rocky she knew, joyful, energetic, and full of life. Everything seemed perfectly normal. She let out a relieved sigh. Maybe all those families had simply misunderstood him. Maybe they weren't prepared for a dog with his level of enthusiasm. Maybe they had been expecting a quiet lapdog and were surprised to find themselves with a bundle of energy instead. For now, though, all seemed well. Rocky was in his element, wagging his tail, running in circles, and thoroughly enjoying himself. Emma watched him closely, still determined to figure out what had gone wrong in his previous homes. She just hoped that by the end of the night, she would have an answer. Luckily, the next morning arrived without incident, and as the golden rays of dawn filtered through Emma's curtains, she couldn't shake the feeling that today would be crucial for Rocky. She had spent the entire night reflecting on his behavior, replaying every moment in her mind, trying to piece together the puzzle of why such a lovable dog kept being sent back to the shelter time and time again. Determined to uncover the truth, Emma quickly got ready and set off for work. The car ride was peaceful, with Rocky curled up in the passenger seat, his tail flicking lazily. He had no idea what awaited him at the shelter that day, how the secrets of his past were finally about to be unraveled. When she arrived, the first thing she did was pull up Rocky's file. The paperwork contained a list of all his previous owners, and as she skimmed through the names, she felt a wave of curiosity wash over her. There had to be a connection, a common thread that explained why each of these families had ultimately decided that they couldn't keep him. Taking a deep breath, Emma started dialing the numbers one by one. Some calls went unanswered, but others were picked up, and soon, a pattern began to emerge. Each of Rocky's previous homes shared a crucial commonality: they all had other pets. This revelation struck Emma like a lightning bolt, an undeniable pattern that had gone unnoticed until now. Determined to confirm her suspicions, she pressed forward with her calls, speaking to as many of Rocky's former owners as she could reach. As she listened, the pieces of the puzzle slowly began to fall into place. One family hesitated before finally admitting, with a heavy sigh, that Rocky had attacked their elderly dog multiple times, unprovoked. They had initially chalked it up to excitement, believing he simply needed time to adjust to his new environment, but the incidents continued, growing in severity until they realized that no amount of patience or training seemed to curb his aggressive tendencies toward their older pet. Heartbroken, they had no choice but to return him. Another adopter, sounding equally regretful, confessed that Rocky had relentlessly chased their 2 cats around the house, never allowing them a moment of peace. What had started as harmless curiosity quickly escalated into something far more alarming: low, guttural growls, snapping jaws, and a terrifying intensity in his eyes whenever the cats came too close. Even when confined to separate spaces, Rocky would scratch and bark at the doors, desperate to get to them as if driven by an instinctive need to eliminate their presence. The family, fearing for their cat's safety, had reluctantly brought him back to the shelter. Yet another former owner recounted how Rocky had clashed repeatedly with their existing dog. At first, they had held out hope, believing that with enough time, the two could learn to coexist. They tried gradual introductions, supervised interactions, and even professional training sessions. But despite their efforts, the fights kept happening, each one worse than the last. The tension between the 2 dogs became unbearable, forcing the family to make an agonizing decision. Returning Rocky wasn't something they wanted to do, but they felt they had no other option. That was it. That was the missing piece of the puzzle. Rocky, for all his sweet and affectionate nature toward humans, simply did not tolerate other animals. Emma sat in the shelter's small office, the weight of her discovery settling over her like a heavy blanket. Rocky had been returned so many times, not because of energy levels or mismatched expectations, but because he simply couldn't get along with other animals. It wasn't a matter of him being misunderstood or families being impatient. The reality was that, despite his affectionate nature toward humans, Rocky saw other pets as a threat. It all made sense now. But the question remained, what could she do about it? For a moment, Emma considered the easy option. She could make a note on Rocky's file, ensuring that he was only adopted by families without other pets. The shelter could be more selective, screening potential adopters more carefully. That might be the safest route, ensuring he wouldn't be returned again. But something inside her hesitated. Could Rocky change? Could he be trained to coexist with other animals? It wouldn't be easy, but if there was even a chance that he could learn, shouldn't she at least try? Emma sighed and looked down at Rocky, who sat beside her chair, his tail wagging happily, completely oblivious to the storm of thoughts in her mind. She knew how most shelters operated. Dogs with behavioral issues, particularly aggression, often struggled to get adopted. And if their problems were deemed serious enough, many of them never made it out at all. She refused to let that happen to Rocky. She had to try. That night, Emma brought Rocky home again, this time with a new plan in mind. Training wasn't going to be immediate, but she had to start somewhere. The first step was controlled exposure. Emma allowed Rocky to see her other pets, but only through a safety gate. This way, he could observe them from a distance without the risk of an actual confrontation. Charlie, her old Labrador, wagged his tail curiously, while Lizzie, the cat, watched cautiously from the other side. Rocky, on the other hand, was furious. He barked aggressively, baring his teeth and lunging at the gate. His small body trembled with frustration, and Emma could see that he still viewed the other animals as intruders. Emma knew this was just the beginning. The first few days were tense. She had to keep a close eye on Rocky at all times, and there were moments when she wondered if this was a losing battle. Perhaps Rocky truly wasn't meant to live with other animals. Maybe he would always need to be the only pet in a home. But then, something changed. Little by little, Rocky's aggression started to lessen. His barks became less frantic, and he no longer threw himself against the gate in a rage. Instead, he would watch Charlie and Lizzie with cautious curiosity rather than hostility. Emma took this as a good sign. Over the next few weeks, she gradually increased Rocky's exposure to her other pets. She used positive reinforcement, rewarding him with treats and praise whenever he remained calm in their presence. At first, Rocky would stiffen whenever Charlie came close, his muscles tensing as if preparing to lunge. But with each passing day, he started to relax just a little more. One evening, Emma was cleaning up in the kitchen when she glanced over and saw something that made her heart skip a beat. Lizzie, the cat, had wandered into the same room as Rocky. This was it. The moment she had been waiting for. She held her breath, half expecting Rocky to react badly. But he didn't. He didn't growl. He didn't lunge. He simply watched as Lizzie walked past him, then turned his attention back to a ball he had been playing with. It was a breakthrough. Feeling more confident, Emma decided it was time for the real test. The next day, she slowly opened the gate and let Charlie walk into the room. The old Labrador padded in calmly, his tail swaying gently. Rocky stiffened, unsure of what to do. Emma watched nervously, her heart pounding. Would Rocky snap? Would all of their progress be undone in an instant? Then, something incredible happened. Instead of attacking, Rocky cautiously stepped forward and sniffed Charlie. His tail gave a tentative wag. Charlie sniffed back, and then, as if years of instinct had suddenly melted away, Rocky's entire posture changed. His tail wagged faster, his eyes lit up with excitement, and he bounced playfully in front of Charlie, inviting him to chase. Emma held her breath. Charlie responded playfully, nudging Rocky, and in an instant, the two dogs were running around the room, playfully chasing each other and wrestling like old friends. There was no aggression, no hostility, just pure, innocent joy. Tears pricked Emma's eyes. She had done it. Rocky had done it. Over the next few days, Rocky continued to improve. He no longer barked at Lizzie or lunged at Charlie. He was still a high-energy dog, but now, instead of seeing other animals as a threat, he was learning to interact with them in a positive way. Emma knew the journey wasn't over. Training would need to continue, and Rocky would always require patience. But for the first time since she had taken him in, she truly believed that he had a chance, a real chance, to find a forever home. Or maybe, he had already found one. As the days passed, Emma found herself growing more attached to Rocky. She had taken him in as a project, hoping to help him overcome his struggles. But now, she couldn't imagine her home without him. He had become part of her family. The time soon came for Rocky to return to the shelter and go up for adoption again. The staff was thrilled with his progress, and for the first time in a long time, they were optimistic that he would find the right home. But as Emma prepared to say goodbye, she realized something. She didn't want to. Over the time he had spent with her, Rocky had changed. And so had she. She had worked so hard to help him overcome his struggles, and now, she couldn't bear the thought of letting him go. She knew, in that moment, that there was only one choice to make. She was going to adopt Rocky herself. It wasn't the plan. It wasn't what she had expected. But it was right. Rocky had already found his forever home, right by her side. Sometimes, all a dog needs is patience, understanding, and a little bit of love to become the best version of themselves. Rocky had proved that, and Emma knew she had made the right choice. Because in the end, Rocky wasn't just a good dog. He was a great one. The moment Emma decided to adopt Rocky, a sense of relief and joy washed over her. It felt right. He had been through so much uncertainty, moving from home to home, never quite fitting in. But now, he belonged. He had a family, a place where he was loved not in spite of his quirks, but because of them. The adoption process was simple. The shelter staff was thrilled, knowing Rocky had finally found someone who understood him. They handed Emma the final paperwork, and just like that, he was hers. Officially. Forever. Taking Rocky home that day felt different. Before, she had taken him in as a temporary guest, a puzzle to solve. Now, He was her dog, her responsibility, her companion. As they drove home, she glanced at him in the rear-view mirror. His tail thumped against the seat, his eyes bright and filled with excitement. "We're really doing this, huh?" she said with a laugh. Rocky let out a happy bark as if answering her. Back home, Emma knew the real work was only beginning. While Rocky had made incredible progress in his interactions with Charlie and Lizzie, she was aware that training had to continue. Just because he had started tolerating them didn't mean he was completely rehabilitated. She needed to be patient, consistent, and above all, committed. She started small, reinforcing positive behavior. Whenever Rocky remained calm around Charlie or Lizzie, she rewarded him with treats and praise. If he showed any signs of aggression, she redirected him immediately, making it clear that hostility was not acceptable. Over time, these small reinforcements shaped his behavior. One of the biggest challenges came during feeding time. Rocky had always been possessive of his food, something Emma hadn't fully realized until she saw how tense he became whenever Charlie or Lizzie were nearby while he ate. The first time Charlie wandered too close to his food bowl, Rocky let out a low growl, his body stiffening. Emma reacted quickly. "No, Rocky. That's not how we behave." She took a deep breath and decided to work through it. She started feeding him by hand, letting him know that food was not something he had to fight for. Gradually, she introduced him to eating near Charlie but with a safe distance, rewarding him when he stayed calm. Slowly but surely, the food aggression faded, replaced by trust. Another hurdle was Rocky's excitement levels. He had so much energy that sometimes he overwhelmed Charlie, who was much older and slower. Lizzie, on the other hand, had learned how to keep her distance when Rocky was in one of his wild moods. Emma started taking Rocky on long walks, helping him burn off some of that energy. She also introduced puzzle toys and games that engaged his mind, keeping him occupied and less likely to seek out trouble. One night, after a particularly active day, Emma sat on the couch, exhausted. Rocky, usually bouncing with energy, curled up beside her, resting his head on her lap. She stroked his fur gently, feeling the steady rise and fall of his breathing. "You're really part of the family now, aren't you?" she murmured. Rocky's tail gave a small wag, and in that moment, Emma felt a deep sense of fulfillment. The next few weeks were filled with small victories. One evening, Emma found Rocky and Charlie curled up together on the same bed. Lizzie, once cautious of Rocky, now seemed less fearful, even brushing past him without hesitation. Rocky had learned to share his space, to coexist, to be part of something bigger than just himself. But as much progress as he made, there were still moments that tested Emma's patience. Some days were harder than others. Rocky would have setbacks. He'd bark excessively at the neighbor's dog, or he'd get overly excited and knock things over. But Emma reminded herself that change took time. He wasn't perfect, but then again, neither was she. One particularly stormy evening, Emma noticed that Rocky was unusually quiet. He wasn't running around the house like he normally did. Instead, he was curled up in a corner, his ears flattened, his body trembling slightly. She frowned, kneeling beside him. "Rocky, what's wrong?" A loud clap of thunder shook the house, and Rocky flinched, his eyes wide with fear. Emma's heart ached. "Oh, buddy, you don't like storms, huh?" She gently reached out, running her hand along his back. He pressed himself against her, seeking comfort. It was the first time she had seen him vulnerable like this. That night, Emma stayed by his side, wrapping him in a blanket and playing soft music to drown out the storm. She whispered soothing words to him, reassuring him that he was safe. Eventually, his trembling stopped, and he drifted into a deep sleep. Moments like these reminded Emma just how far Rocky had come. He had once been an uncertain, restless dog, bouncing between homes, never finding where he belonged. Now, he had stability, love, and a place where he was truly safe. The days turned into weeks, and soon, weeks into months. Rocky became more than just a pet. He became Emma's shadow, following her from room to room, greeting her with endless enthusiasm every time she came home. He had transformed not just in behavior but in spirit. One day, while walking in the park, a woman approached Emma. "Excuse me, but your dog is absolutely beautiful. What breed is he?" Emma smiled, looking down at Rocky, who sat obediently beside her. "He's a shelter dog. Not sure of the breed exactly, but he's got a lot of heart." The woman crouched down, scratching behind Rocky's ears. "He seems so well behaved. You must have done a great job training him." Emma laughed. "It wasn't always easy, but he's come a long way." Rocky looked up at her with those bright, expressive eyes, and Emma felt a surge of pride. He had been a dog no one could keep, a dog with too much energy, too many quirks, too many so-called flaws. But all he had really needed was someone to understand him. As they walked home, Emma realized something profound. She had set out to change Rocky, to help him become a dog that could fit into a family. But in the process, he had changed her too. He had taught her patience, resilience, and the power of unconditional love. That night, as Emma settled into bed, Rocky curled up beside her, letting out a contented sigh. She smiled, running her fingers through his fur. "We did it, Rocky," she whispered. "We finally found where we belong." And as sleep took her, she knew without a doubt that adopting Rocky had been the best decision she had ever made. As time passed, Rocky's transformation became more apparent. What had once been a dog full of unpredictability, confusion, and loneliness was now a confident, loving, and well-adjusted companion. Emma had not only changed his life, he had changed hers too. The bond they shared was undeniable. Every morning, Rocky greeted Emma with boundless excitement, his tail wagging like a metronome set to the highest speed. Every evening, he curled up beside her, content and secure in the home he had finally found. One day, Emma was sitting in her living room, watching Rocky play with Charlie. The sight of them together, tails wagging, chasing each other around the furniture, filled her with pride. Just months ago, the thought of Rocky peacefully coexisting with another animal seemed impossible. But here he was, proving that change was possible, that love and patience could reshape even the most troubled hearts. But even with all the progress he had made, Emma knew their journey wasn't over. Training had to continue, and new challenges would come their way. One of those challenges arrived unexpectedly. One afternoon, Emma decided to take Rocky to a dog park for the first time. She had hesitated before, worried about how he might react to unfamiliar dogs. But after months of training and gradual exposure, she felt he was ready. As they entered the park, Rocky's ears perked up, his tail wagging excitedly. He sniffed the air, taking in all the new scents. Several dogs were already running around, chasing balls, playing tug-of-war, or simply lounging under the shade of trees. Emma kept a firm grip on his leash, ready to intervene if necessary. At first, Rocky was cautious. He stood close to Emma, watching the other dogs intently. Then, a friendly golden retriever trotted up, sniffing at Rocky curiously. Emma held her breath, waiting for Rocky's reaction. To her relief, he remained calm. He sniffed the retriever back, his tail wagging hesitantly. The retriever playfully nudged him, and after a moment of hesitation, Rocky responded with a playful bark. Emma smiled. "Good boy, Rocky." It was another victory, another step forward. Over the next hour, Rocky cautiously explored the park, interacting with other dogs at his own pace. There were moments when he tensed up, unsure of how to react, but Emma was there to reassure him, guiding him through every new interaction. By the end of their visit, Rocky had even joined in a game of chase, running alongside a group of dogs with his tongue hanging out, pure joy in his eyes. The moment filled Emma with a deep sense of accomplishment. She had taken in a dog that no one wanted, a dog who had been returned time and time again, and she had given him a second chance. And in return, he had given her a friendship unlike any other. As they walked home from the park, Emma felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude. Rocky had taught her so much, about patience, about resilience, about the importance of believing in something even when it seemed impossible. Over the next few months, Rocky continued to thrive. He had fully integrated into his new life, his old insecurities fading away with each passing day. He no longer barked aggressively at other animals, and his interactions with Charlie and Lizzie had become second nature. The once restless, troubled dog had transformed into a loving, confident companion. But Emma knew there were still many dogs like Rocky, dogs who were misunderstood, dogs who just needed someone willing to take the time to understand them. Inspired by her experience, she began volunteering more actively at the shelter, helping other dogs who struggled with similar issues. She worked with families looking to adopt, sharing Rocky's story as an example of what patience and commitment could achieve. She even started a small social media page, documenting Rocky's journey in the hopes of encouraging others to give shelter animals a chance. One day, she received a message from a couple who had been struggling with their newly adopted dog, Max. He was reactive, difficult to handle, and they were on the verge of returning him to the shelter. Emma immediately agreed to meet them, bringing Rocky along. When they arrived, Max, a nervous, skittish border collie mix, barked frantically at the sight of Rocky. His body was tense, his eyes darting around as if he was expecting something bad to happen. Emma knelt down, speaking softly. "It's okay, Max. You're safe." She guided the couple through some of the techniques that had helped Rocky. She showed them how to introduce Max to new experiences gradually, how to use positive reinforcement, and how to build trust without forcing him into uncomfortable situations. It wasn't magic, and it wasn't instant, but over time, Max began to settle. The couple was grateful, and Max had been given another chance, just like Rocky had. That night, as Emma sat on her porch with Rocky by her side, she thought about how different her life had become since the day she first decided to take him home. What had started as a simple mission to understand one dog had evolved into something much greater. She had found a purpose, a passion for helping animals that others had given up on. She looked down at Rocky, who was resting his head on her lap, his eyes half closed in contentment. "You changed my life, you know that," she murmured. Rocky's tail wagged lazily, as if he understood. She had once feared that Rocky would never find a forever home. But in the end, he had found something even better. He had found family, love, and a place where he truly belonged. And along the way, Emma had found the same. As the stars twinkled above, she smiled, knowing that this was only the beginning of their journey. Rocky's story wasn't just about finding a home, it was about proving that every dog, no matter how troubled or misunderstood, deserved a second chance. And sometimes, that second chance was all it took to change everything.